and I honestly have no idea how long it took us, but it was the middle of the night, and by the time we got to the summit, dawn was just breaking, and it was the most amazing sunrise I've ever seen. So it's little things like that that really set things apart.
Episode number 403, A Little Winter in the Summertime with the Iditarod Dog Sled Race.
You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast, brought to you by 180 Tech. We talk with adventurers from around the globe to bring you the inspiration and motivation you need to get started in the outdoors or to keep you moving if you're already there. This episode is brought to you in part by Kind. Kind makes delicious, healthy snacks using whole ingredients. If you guys haven't tried it yet, their pressed bars by Kind are the best in my opinion. Go try the Mango Apple Chia. It's awesome. We've got a special offer for you to try 20 Kind snacks with their new snack pack. You can enjoy 50% off and free shipping on your first snack pack when you subscribe to it through Snack Club, which is Kind's monthly snacks subscription service. Go to kindsnacks.com/sports for more details. That's kindsnacks.com/sports to learn more and to subscribe to the snack pack.
How did your episode 400 challenge go? Those of you who heard last Thursday's show know that was episode 400. It was amazing for me to realize that we had done 400 episodes, and I challenged everybody to help us celebrate 400 episodes by making a small difference in someone else's life that day. And I'm curious how that went for you. If you haven't done that yet, look for a way. Just be open. Look for a way to help someone else around you. And if you do that, then I think it will reward you as well as them, and you will help to make the world a little bit better place. That was my episode 400 challenge. I would love to hear some stories about what transpired when you reached out and made a difference for somebody. So if you go to the adventuresportspodcast.com and you click on the Contact Us button, then you can email us there, or you can just email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And remember that email address, because there's another reason I want you to use that today. Winter time in the summer? What's that about? I don't know. Sometimes midsummer like this, I start dreaming about those snowy slopes and that refreshing breeze, and maybe snowshoeing or doing some winter mountaineering or whatever your winter sport may be. And it's kind of fun in the summer to take a break from the summer heat and just think about how delightful winter is. It's fun that we have variety in our seasons, I tell you that much. So today's show is a taste of winter in the summer. I'm going to go back and replay a show for you. It was originally episode 114. We're talking about all the way back in 2016, so a couple of years ago, and it's about the Iditarod dog sled race in Alaska. Travis interviewed Blake Freking and did a fantastic job telling us about dog sledding. I hope you enjoy your taste of winter in the summer. And I wanted to also mention Patreon, of course. Behind Patreon, you get access to full-length episodes, special content that we don't put out for the rest of the audience. And the way that you get access to that is by becoming a patron on Patreon, a Patreon member. And it costs less than a cup of coffee once a month. You support the Adventure Sports Podcast that way, and you get access to some really cool content. The last guy that we had on Patreon was Leon Logothetis, and Leon has been on the show before. He's the guy that got the old yellow motorcycle with a sidecar and traveled around the planet. He wrote the book, The Kindness Diaries, and now has a Netflix series where you can watch what happened as he traveled around the planet on his yellow motorcycle, depending on the kindness of strangers. And he did it kind of as a human experiment to find out what the world was really like. They could not give him money. They could only show him kindness by giving him maybe food or a place to sleep. And he traveled all the way around the world doing this, and he filmed it. And you can see that on Netflix. But here's a cool thing, too. If you would like a copy of the book, The Kindness Diaries, then Leon was kind enough to give us some copies to give to you. So I can give you a free copy of The Kindness Diaries. Just email me at that same email address, info@adventuresportspodcast.com, or click the Contact Us button, which is kind of on the lower right on our website, and let us know that you would like a copy of the book. We have a few copies, And when they're gone, they're gone. So act fast because it's going to be first come, first serve on these. So anyway, hope you do that. info@adventuresportspodcast.com. One last thing I'd like to mention is the very best thing that you can do, even better than becoming a patron on Patreon, to help support the Adventure Sports Podcast is to tell a friend. Tell a friend about the show so that they can hear the fun stories, these amazing guests that come in and inspire us with all their exploits, ways that they go out and connect with nature and get healthy. And I did a whole episode on the reason we do the Adventure Sports Podcast. And just a quick revisit of some of the main points is you find something you love to do that's active. You get up off the couch and away from the TV and you start moving again, your health improves, and you have so much fun. The reward for being out there doing something that you become passionate about. You make a lot of new friends because there are always communities around adventure sports. And you begin this healthier lifestyle with new friends. And then not only does it benefit you, but it benefits the next generation. Because whenever you're healthy and full of energy and going out and having a lot of fun, well, that's contagious. Other people see that and they want to be a part of it too. And those other people might be your children or maybe your children someday. And by setting that example, not only do you get wonderful family time, doing adventure sports together, but you also are setting an example of health and really valuing the wonderful blessings that we've been given, nature and these amazing bodies that can do amazing things, and having life experiences, making memories that last for a lifetime, far more valuable than all the stuff that we try to acquire or the fake entertainment we watch on TV. Instead, this is real stuff. It's where the rubber meets the road, and that's what the Adventure Sports Podcast is all about. So tell a friend about the show, will you? And maybe they can be inspired by some of our guests that come on to try some of these sports. Again, today's show is a taste of winter in the summertime with the Iditarod dog sled race.
During the month of March every year, the Iditarod sled dog race is run in Alaska from Willow to Nome and covers more than 1,100 miles over 9 to 15 days or more, depending on the team. 2016 will mark the 43rd year of the race, and three-time Iditarod competitor Blake Freking is with me today to talk about the incredible adventure sled dog racing is. Blake, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Travis. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to hear all about sled dog racing. I think hopefully you got a bunch of cool stories to tell us.
I can come up with something.
That's good. So do us a favor. Take a little time to tell us about your background. What is it that got you started in sled dog racing?
Sure. So the slippery slope that kind of brought me to where I'm at. I started out, I did a lot of cross-country skiing as a kid, and that kind of evolved into hooking a water skiing rope behind my cousin's snowmobile, and he would drag me around and do his best to injure me. And that kind of progressed into, I started looking for a dog to start skijuring, and I hadn't really heard of skijuring as an official sport or anything else. But I found a Siberian Husky and hooked it up in front of my skis and started traveling a bit, and ultimately ended up purchasing another dog and started doing some camping trips and going some farther distance. And I just really enjoyed doing the long distance kind of runs, and it always amazed me how much country I could cover with just a couple dogs on skis. And after doing that for a few years, I started looking for another dog, which is how this kind of generally progresses. Ran into a young lady who happened to be in Alaska training for the junior Iditarod at the time, and ended up purchasing a lead dog from her. And she was handling at a kennel, and I'll talk more about handling in a little bit. But she was helping out at a kennel up there, and I purchased this dog from her. And the folks that she was living with were both in their mid-80s at the time, and he was going to be in Rochester, Minnesota, near my hometown, having some surgery. And she had asked if I wanted the opportunity to meet them, and they were heroes of mine at the time. And I leapt at the chance, and I drove out to Rochester and met up with Earl and Natalie. And by the end of the conversation, they were inquiring whether I would be interested in coming to their place to handle for a season. And I was pretty green to mushing in general and had a good job. I had finished school and everything else. But something just drew me into this, and I felt like it's something I had to do. I had to go to Alaska and do this. So kind of took a leave of absence, which turned into a permanent leave of absence for my job, and went to Alaska. I started out running their puppies and doing the handler duties, cleaning up after dogs. And after a great season there in Alaska with the Norses, they gave me the opportunity to run their team in the Iditarod. So about 7 months after my first run on a sled, I was signed up for the biggest race in the world. It was pretty steep learning curve for me.
Holy cow, I would imagine. I don't think many people probably take that path.
No, I think you're probably right. But so I came home for that summer and tried to earn a little money, and every thought and action was based on getting to Nome, and so I went back to Alaska in September of 1999 and started training for my qualifiers for Iditarod. This is eternally changing, it seems like, but at that time you had to run a 300-mile qualifier, a 200-mile qualifier. So I got up there and trained up, and my second race was my 200-mile qualifier and finished that quite easily, had a great time. And 2 weeks later, I ran my 300-miler. Also had a great time. So started the Iditarod in March. It had its pitfalls and wonderful experiences, and overall had a great time. The Norses in Alaska are known for their Siberian Huskies, and I really stuck with that. It's something I'm quite passionate about. Every year there's maybe 2 or 3 Siberian teams that compete in the race. The rest are all crossbred teams. So that kind of sets us apart from the group a little bit.
Okay.
So
yeah, I was going to ask you about the dogs involved, because everybody, when we think of the Iditarod or sled dog racing, we always imagine the Siberian Husky, but the dogs can be quite varied, can't they?
Yeah, the Alaskan Husky is an open gene pool. It's not a registered breed by any means. They're bred entirely for performance and racing. These races like Iditarod and the Yukon Quest and some of these distance races. And the Siberian Huskies, the racing bred Siberians, are really quite similar to the original Siberians that came in back in the early 1900s.
Yeah, that's cool. So you kind of picked up the pace pretty quickly when you first got to qualify and run the Iditarod. Was there a moment that just really struck you as, this is what I absolutely love to do? Is there a story behind that?
I don't know if there's really one moment. It was actually my first sled run in Alaska, which was in 1998. It really just hit me that was just such an amazing experience, and I knew it was something that was going to stick with me for the rest of my life after that very first run on a sled. But after my first Iditarod, I came back to Minnesota and ended up working, and I brought a few dogs with me, and that young lady that I bought the dog from the year prior, got together with her, and she had her kennel, and she was in vet school in St. Paul, Minnesota at the time. So we were racing together with her dogs and my dogs together, and ran a few races here in Minnesota, and then some circumstances came together, and we needed to move the kennel to northern Minnesota, where I had some property. And that was in the fall of 2003. So I called a friend of mine in Germany and asked him if he was up for a great adventure, and told him we needed to move 50 dogs and all the kennels and fences and supplies. And so we moved to northern Minnesota and started training and racing up there. And that year was my rookie in the John Bear Grease Marathon, which is a 400-mile race. It's the longest continuous race in the lower 48. And won that as a rookie, so that was a big boost for us against some really good teams that had done well in the Iditarod in the past. And since then, I went north and ran the Yukon Quest in 2005, which is the other 1,000-mile race. And my wife and I, now she's my wife, and we have 2 together. I skipped that part. We ran the Iditarod together in 2008. We started the race about 14 minutes apart, and we finished about 9 seconds apart.
Wow.
That was one of the highlights of my racing career, certainly. And I ran the Iditarod again in 2010, and since then I believe I've run every Bear Grease Marathon since 2004, and run a lot of races in Montana, Maine, all over Canada, basically all over the lower 48. We've been to Italy racing and Russia as well.
Well, you've been involved in a lot of races, and these are not little races. I mean, the Iditarod is, 1,100 miles or so. The Yukon Quest is 1,000 miles itself. I mean, the Bear Grease is 400 miles. I mean, you guys are doing a lot of running over multiple days.
We are, yeah. We're putting on in the neighborhood of 3,500 to 4,000 miles a year, it seems like, on our teams.
Wow. So how do you prepare for these things? I mean, I would think that you need to have some sort of relationship with a dog, with the teams ahead of time. It's not like you can just throw a pack together and get going.
Exactly. And everything we do is based on the dogs. Everything from care to, having a really good personal relationship with each dog. A lot of people say they know their dogs better than their kids that are in the sport.
I'm sure the kids love that.
Oh, yeah, they love to hear that. So, yeah, everything we do in the training and conditioning is year-round for us, and it's all about developing them as a sled dog and also creating a great relationship to them because, they don't really realize we're out there to run big races like I did out of the Bear Grease. They just run because they love to do it, and we're there to kind of create an environment so they know that we'll never ask anything more of them than what they can achieve. And we're always keeping their best interest in mind, whether it's in training or racing and conditioning. And so their well-being and their nutrition and their training is always at the top of our list.
Yeah. So you guys you're building up trust in the dogs, and the dogs are in turn building trust in you.
Exactly right. Yeah. The more we start that out as puppies, we go on these we call them puppy adventures. We go out on walks, and we're starting to push them physically just a little bit. And in that, we'll do things like this time of year, we've got a little snow on the ground, so we'll go out with some puppies, and they'll get off the trail a little bit and get in some deep snow, and they might cry a little because they're kind of hoping someone will pick them up or something like that. And if we encourage them with our voice, it starts with that. You can come to me and get through this, and it'll all be good. And we go from there until we're crossing the Alaska range or something like that.
That's cool. Well, I'm sure my kids would probably volunteer to come up and help you with the puppies at some point.
The puppies.
So I'm sure we have some people out there thinking, you know what? I've always looked at the Iditarod. I've always thought, man, that would be the coolest thing. Why would you encourage people to try it out for themselves?
Oh, boy.
Sled dog racing in general, maybe not the Iditarod for the first one.
So sled dogs, it's an interesting sport to get into because it's such a commitment. It's not like a race car or something like that you can turn the key off and park it in the garage. It's 365 days a year. They need care, and so it is a big commitment. So anyone that's looking to get into it really has to search themselves and find out if it's something that they really want. I was talking about handling earlier, and to me that's a great way to step into it. A lot of the bigger mushers, bigger kennels have handlers that they employ, and what they do is come for a season, and in our kennel specifically, they're helping with the daily routine with the dogs, and also usually they end up training some of our teams, but also our puppy teams. We have our main race group, but we also have the yearlings and 2-year-olds. We kind of call our junior varsity team. And what they're doing is just, it's a lot of confidence building, and they're doing some races, not to be competitive, but to just see the finish line and experience the race and kind of experiences some of the stresses involved with racing. But do it on a level that they know that they're going to succeed. And basically it's just building them up to graduate to the main group.
Yeah, they seem to thrive when we're on the line together. I mean, every time you look at sled dogs in a video somewhere, they're just crazy raring to go. I mean, you have to anchor the thing to keep them from running off.
We do.
I don't it's crazy that these dogs just get so excited to do what they do.
We do have to anchor them to keep them down, and they will not stop. If we fall off the back of the sled, they'll keep going just because that's what they're bred to do. And we don't have to teach them to run or force them to run or even encourage them to run. They go on their own. The first time we put them in harness, most of what we're actually trying to do is get them to calm down to a point where they can actually run. A lot of times the first time in harness, they're going bonkers and they're chewing their lines and chewing their neighbors and chewing their harness. And so a lot of it is, making them into a professional athlete also.
Camp Crate, 3, 2, 1.
So we had some customers in the backcountry call us because they were concerned they had altitude sickness. And we were able to talk them down, get them to a safe place, create an emergency plan. We were willing to do anything we needed to get them out of there, but they ended up taking our advice, still having a really good trip. Camp Crate is a gear rental trip planning service. We will plan a backpacking trip for you if you don't have one planned, and then we rent you all the gear, send it to your house, send it to your hotel. Anywhere in the U.S., we will ship you gear. And then once you're done, you put it back in the box and return it back to us. Most of our customers are first-timers, so we want to give you the confidence to go out into the wilderness with the right gear and with the know-how. With 24/7 support, we're able to really make you feel comfortable out there while at the same time definitely challenging yourself. A lot of people have told us it's been life-changing for them or their best trip they've ever done. Campcrate.net.
Got it, Mason. That's a take.
Hey, ASP listeners, have you ever tried a Kind Bar? You may have seen them in your local grocery store, coffee shop, or gym. They make delicious, healthy snacks using whole ingredients. Well, if you're ready to try some tasty and healthy snacks, we've got a special deal for you. Try 20 Kind snacks from 7 of their unique product lines with their new snack pack. You can enjoy 50% off and free shipping on your first snack pack when you subscribe to it through their Snack Club. Snack Club is Kind's monthly snack subscription service. Go to kindsnacks.com/sports for more details on that. I love their pressed bars like the Mango Apple Chia bars, or I pretty much guarantee you're going to love their breakfast bars first thing in the morning when you climb out of that hammock. So take a minute and see what they're creating over at kindsnacks.com/sports and get your 50% off plus free shipping on your first order. That's kindsnacks.com/sports. So about what age, what is the prime, or how many years do they run typically?
So we'll start them out at about 10 months of age. We do a lot of free running, which is just basically, conditioning, getting them a little bit muscled up and learning where their feet are and how to run. And we'll usually introduce them to harness at about 10 months of age. And from then, till about a year and a half, it's all just about fun. It's all going out for fun runs and not really training or conditioning. It's just, learning about life as a sled dog, basically. And then they'll graduate up to our junior varsity team where they'll start really training and conditioning for races up to, maybe 100 miles in length, something like that. And then after that, they'll graduate to our teams where we're training big miles and doing some bigger races.
Okay. Now let's go back to skijoring that you had mentioned. I had never heard of that before, and this is basically hooking a dog or two up to a tow line and skiing behind them. Is this, I assume, cross-country skiing? Tell me more about that because I'm pretty intrigued with the idea of it.
Yeah, so that's how I got involved, and it was a long time. I thought I invented the sport up until I got a catalog from a company, and there was a book called Skijor with Your Dog, and I was amazed that someone else was actually doing this. But it's basically similar to a climbing harness without the leg belts, basically. So it's a harness that you wear and you attach yourself to 2 dogs and you're cross-country skiing behind them. And, they're using both classic style and skate skiing, and it's a competitive sport as well.
Really? So, these dogs like to pull and pull and pull. What happens when you do go down when you're doing this? Do you have a way to release them, or do you pretty much just anchor them at that point since it's only 2 dogs?
No, if it's just 2 dogs, usually you can get them to stop, generally speaking. Okay. A lot of times they'll stop, or even if they keep trying to pull, usually you can get yourself back up on 2 skis.
That's cool. That sounds like a lot of fun. So how about a story that was just like the best story being out there in one of these races or just practice and whatnot? What's one of your greatest experiences?
Oh, there's so many experiences, some big and some small, of course. One that comes to mind, I was running the Yukon Quest, and there's a big climb called Eagle Summit, and we were having a hard time getting up Eagle Summit, and I honestly have no idea how long it took us, but it was the middle of the night, and by the time we got to the summit, dawn was just breaking, and it was the most amazing sunrise I've ever seen. So it's little things like that that really set things apart, and a lot of times it's just a sense of pride. You know, we have these dogs that we hold in our hands as puppies, and you know they're weighing just a pound or two, and to see them grow up and then condition themselves to the point where they're finishing a race like Iditarod, it's an enormous sense of pride and accomplishment, both for us and the dogs.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And when we're conditioning, you know, when we're racing, we're covering over 100 miles a day, and for them that's another thing that just amazes me is the athleticism in these dogs. You know, we'll do a training run. Tomorrow will be for instance, we're doing a 40-mile run, and we'll do that before breakfast. For most humans, that's a pretty major accomplishment. For those guys, they just, you know, they'll knock it out in a few hours and be back at it.
Yeah, they are amazing. You see them outside, and you know, for a dog like that to be inside, he'd probably roast. You know, to sleep inside, they just burrow themselves down in the snow and go to sleep and wait for the next day where they can run.
That's exactly right. We spend all kinds of money on dog houses and bedding and things like that for them, and half the time they don't. They'll rather curl up out in the snow and dig a hole.
So tell me a little bit about the mechanics of it. I mean, you have the sled. The dogs are hooked into it. How are you actually controlling the dogs via voice, and how responsive are they? Or are they just pretty much picking up a trail and going for it with a little bit of input?
A lot of that's a product of training. So we have our lead dogs, and there's a lot of misconceptions about lead dogs, you know, being big alpha males, kind of Jack London kind of stuff. But the lead dogs are generally some of the hardest driven dogs in the team, and you want them to be smart enough to be able to pick up your commands and cues, but also have that drive and be able to keep the team lined up. And it's a pretty stressful position, especially with a big team. You know, when you have all these dogs behind them, you know, trying to push the pace and things like that. So all of our communication is done verbally. We have nothing to really control them otherwise. So we have directional commands. G is right and haw is left, and we use whoa command to get them to slow down, you know, if we're going over icy conditions and things like that. So, and as far as mechanics, as far as braking, we have a mechanical brake on our sled and also a drag pad to help regulate speed a little bit. And then we also have our anchors that we carry on the sled as well. We call them snow hooks, and we use that when we stop and if we need to go up to tend to any dogs, or if we're snacking or anything like that. We'll stop and set our snow hooks. A lot of times we'll try and pull them, which this time of year when it's more powdered snow and it's not packed down, they can pull those hooks pretty easily. So they're always raring to go, it seems like.
Yeah, I would imagine. So here's a dumb question. What's actually on the sled during a race? I mean, imagine you're over there, 9-15 days. You do have to take some provisions for in between your stops, but what's actually on the sled?
Sure. Like on a race like Iditarod, there's several checkpoints along the way. And prior to the race, we send out between 1,200 and 1,600 pounds of primarily dog food out to those checkpoints. And so in our sled, we'll probably have a little bit of human gear and food, but it's primarily dog food. We'll carry jackets for the dogs for when they're resting. Sometimes we're carrying straw for the dogs, a little survival stuff for ourselves, and we carry a cooker for melting snow, for water for the dogs. But it's mostly dog food that we're packing.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, imagine you have to balance that with the weight, obviously. You don't want to load the thing down too much like any other type of racing, so that's got to be a tough thing. I bet you have to be a bit of a veterinarian to run a team like this as well. It's not just, like you said, turning on the ignition of the race car. You got to understand your animals.
Of course, we're always analyzing gaits and, looking for, there's always little injuries that can pop up along the way, just like humans, muscle strains and tendon strains, that kind of thing. Generally mild, but we're going through some pretty wild country sometimes, and if we go through an area where there's been some moose traveling through, they have these, we call them post holes, where a moose has walked through, and if a dog falls into one of those holes, they can get injured pretty bad. So yeah, we're always monitoring that, and we have our own, within our kennel, we kind of have protocols that we kind of go by. If a dog has an injury, he has a fair amount of time off to recover from that. And it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it's something we certainly do our best to take care of.
Right. So how many dogs do you have at a time? I mean, do you have multiple teams, or do you have a team that kind of rotates through multiple dogs?
Well, we have several teams, actually. So in our kennel, we have 60 dogs right now, and about 30 of them are training for bigger races. And then we have about 20 in our smaller, what I call our junior varsity group. They're training for some smaller races. And then beyond that, we have puppies and our retirees. And earlier you asked about the ages. So they join our team at about 2 years of age, and they can run competitively up to 10 or 11 years old.
Wow, really?
Yeah, so we'll retire them. It's very individual, up kind of each dog, but usually between 9 and 11. And then at that point, they'll go back to running with our junior varsity team for a year and train those guys up, and then they'll enjoy retirement.
That's cool. So how about a story about a time when things didn't go as planned?
Well, let's see. In my rookie Iditarod, I was leaving a checkpoint called Nome, and we're going across it's a series of rivers, and we get into an area called the Burn, and there's a big wildfire back. It's been about 20 years now, but it was hot enough where it burned out a lot of the seed material and things, and it never really regenerated very well. So there's a lot of wind that blows through there, and the snow generally doesn't stick to the ground very well. And we were traveling across some of those lakes, and we got on some ice, and the wind started blowing the team sideways across this lake, and I saw this stump coming, and I knew I couldn't stop. I knew I was going to hit it, and it hit the sled right on, and the sled came over. I landed on my head, and the sled landed on me, and in my semi-conscious state, I did grab onto the sled because I knew the dogs were going to drag it away, and the tug never came, and I was able to look over the sled, and I saw my team running off into the woods.
Oh, no.
And it was about another 60 miles to the checkpoint, and I had no idea how far they'd go, so I grabbed a couple little supplies and took off running behind them, and it was 7 or 8 miles. I finally caught up to them again. They had stopped nicely alongside the trail. I came running over this hill, and I saw this team, and I assumed it was another team camping, and I was hoping that the musher that was with that team might have saw mine and got him stopped. And the closer I got, I realized it was my own group, so I took 4 dogs from that group and went back and got my sled and kind of pieced it together. And the sled was destroyed to the point where there was nothing in front to hold it together. So basically it was 2 skis with a big bag dangling in front of it. And we took across the Burn, and the Burn is home to a fairly large buffalo herd. And we're heading across there, and with these skis kind of dangling out front, the dogs were just having a great time because they were smelling the buffalo, and it was pretty dusty and dirty, and they were having a great time. But my skis kept hitting frozen buffalo crap and sent me rolling. So after having this major head and spine trauma, I got drug about halfway across the Burn. And later in the race, I wasn't sure if I could continue on. My back injury was so bad. And I ran into a veterinarian who's also a chiropractor. And he managed to fix me up and got me dialed in, and we made it to Nome with no problem. But that was a pretty wild time.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, how cool is it that they actually stopped? I mean, is that pretty rare that you would come across them like that? Or
it was interesting because there was no tangles or anything else. I don't know if they just realized I wasn't there and decided to stop, or if they just decided it was time for a break. I have no idea.
Wow, you would have been in for a haul had they not done that, though.
That's exactly right. And speaking of lead dogs, we live right near the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, which is an unmotorized area, and we spent a lot of time up there during the winter. And a few years ago, we go up there in the spring and do some fishing in late March, early April, and we were up there, and we had spent a couple days, and we were coming back out, and it had warmed up to where the ice was thawing away from a lot of the islands and the shores. And I had this lead dog whom had led me all over the place. He's a fabulous dog, and I was trying to give him cues as to where to go to avoid the open water. And I realized that he wasn't listening to me. He was dialed in enough to where he knew where he was going. So I just sat there and stayed quiet, and he navigated all that open water and got us about 35 miles back to our truck. So it's
wow, that's cool.
Pretty amazing when you see that instinctual drive to get through something like that and avoid some of those dangers.
Yeah, absolutely. Our co-host Kurt interviewed Paul Shirky. I don't know if you know who that is, but he interviewed him back in episode 22, and Paul told a story about coming across a military. It was like a radar outpost where a couple of guys were just living in the bunker, and they had a dog that was essentially hanging around. When they cooked breakfast, cooked dinner, the dog would show up. They'd throw him a scrap or two, and the dog would head out. And these guys on their sled dog team had arrived and were talking to the guys, the military guys at the outpost. And when they left, the dog ended up following them. And they couldn't quite make friends with the dog, but it was just always kind of be off to their side and with them to some degree. The long story short, they ultimately befriended the dog and hooked him into the sled. And they said he pulled as a lead dog. They figured he was a stray that broke off of a team somewhere, and they ended up using him for a long time after that. He said it was just such a good instinctual sled dog. It was just a really neat story.
That's fantastic. There's one instance I was going across the Alaska range through what's called Rainy Pass, and the wind was so great I could only see about 4 of my 16 dogs that I had in the team. And I had, actually, it was the same dog that I was just talking about on the ice in lead, and I really had to trust him to keep us to the trail, and every so often I'd see, tracks from other teams and other markers, and I had no idea where we were heading or where we would end up. But he got us where we needed to be, and partway through there, I went up to check on him to see how they're doing, and I got up to my lead dog, Jody was his name, and his eyes were totally packed with ice and from the blowing wind and snow. So after that, I'd stop every couple minutes and just go up and clean off his face and give him a few words of encouragement, and then go back to my sled where I couldn't see him any longer. But there's some pretty fabulous animals. They're outrageous.
Yeah, sounds like they need some doggles, the dog goggles.
We've experimented with that with limited success.
Yeah, I bet that doesn't work too well in that situation.
By now you certainly know who Bent Gate is. That's for a great reason. Bent Gate Mountaineering has been sponsoring the Adventure Sports Podcast almost from the beginning, and we really appreciate that. They've made it possible for all the great shows to continue coming your way. We want to say thanks by reminding you to go to them for your backcountry gear. If you live in Colorado, then just stop by their store in Golden. If not, go to bentgate.com. They have what you need, from the latest ultralight gear to the tried and true classics for climbing, hiking, and camping, like Arc'teryx, Hilleberg, Nemo, Western Mountaineering, and many more. Need advice? They have you covered there too. Their staff are passionate adventurers who can offer help from their own experiences. Bentgate also hosts lots of events and speakers. Check out their website to see the schedule and to see all of their products. Help take care of the Adventure Sports Podcast by getting your gear from Bentgate Mountaineering.
So talking about weather, do they ever stop these races for weather, or is it pretty much anything goes and you just plow through?
Well, generally speaking, it's anything goes, but the last few years, the Iditarod has had to reschedule and move the start up to Fairbanks a couple times. We've had our Bear Grease canceled and postponed. So, there is, if there is a race change, generally it's because of warm weather, not cold weather or wind.
Yeah, but more of a lack of snow than
too
much of it.
And actually, there's a greater concern for the dogs when it starts to get warmer as well. They operate best in cold temps, and there's a concern of overheating once it gets much above freezing.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't have thought of that. So what about the races themselves? You've competed in a lot of different races. Would you consider the Iditarod the toughest of them, or is there another one that is just not as well known in our community?
Personally, I would consider the Yukon Quest to be the toughest of all the races. It's something that's debated a lot among the distance racers, and I've run one Yukon Quest and several Iditarods. But the Yukon Quest, generally, it's a bit colder. It's a lot farther between checkpoints. I believe the Iditarod has 26 checkpoints, and I'm probably not correct on this, but Quest has about 9, I believe. So it's a lot farther between checkpoints, and it's much more remote. A lot more mountains. Usually the snow's a bit deeper. Yeah, hands down, I would consider the Yukon Quest to be the toughest race.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And you've run that one. You finished 11th in that one before?
I believe so.
Yeah. And how many people usually run that?
It depends. It goes from year to year, usually around 30, something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And it's a much smaller. The Yukon Quest is a much smaller race as far as entries. Iditarod will have up to 90 entries a year, and the Yukon Quest is considerably smaller. So it's a very quaint race as far as that goes. You know, the guys that race it are every year, especially, are pretty seasoned usually. The year I happened to run, I ran with a guy who I believe he ran every quest up to that point. So it was like having a tour guide with me. The dynamics out on the trail, a lot of times, you know, the teams, there'll be a few teams that kind of just fall in together and end up on the same schedule, running about the same speed. So there's all these little groups within the race also.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of these races seem to be essentially commemorating something. Like the Iditarod is it's the races to commemorate the run of the serum, you know, the diphtheria serum up to Nome, Alaska, to retrace that trail. So a lot of these races, as I looked through, seem to have something that established them long ago, like a mail route or a gold rush route or something like that.
Yeah, a lot of the trails that we travel on are trails that have been used for ages, and the Iditarod Trail is one of them. It was most of the trail is on routes that have been used from village to village for thousands of years, probably. And the same is true with Yukon Quest and the Bear Grease as well.
Yep, yeah, there's a lot of history there. Well, in my research, just looking through some of the information, I came across the Red Lantern Award, and this is for the last person to finish the Iditarod. It looks like the longest person, I should say the person that took the most time to finish the race and win the Red Lantern Award was in 73 for 32 days and 15 hours.
Right.
That's a heck of a long time on a sled.
It is a long time to be out on the trail.
You got to think that was back when the technology and the garments weren't quite what we have in 2015 too. So that's that's a pretty good accomplishment in and of itself, even if it's last.
I think some of those guys that year were out actually instead of sending caches of supplies out ahead of time, they were just hunting for their meat for the dogs as they went down the trail.
Yeah, I'll bet. Yeah, that's crazy. That's been in. That race has been going on for a long time.
Yes.
So, tips and tricks. We went over a little bit about, maybe if somebody were looking to get into this, what are some tips and tricks that you would have from all of your experience doing it?
Well, really one of the best things for a person to do if they really wanted to get involved would be to get a mentor to start out with, and someone that'll share the information they've got and all the little things. The biggest of which is being able to connect with your dogs and have a good relationship with them, and the rest is golden, really. But as far
so establish that relationship with your team, and at that point, it's just a matter of training and running at that point, huh?
Exactly. And there's just so many little things as far as management of the dogs and the teams, both just within the kennel environment and as route running and training and racing. So there's so many things that I realized that I learned as a handler, just following someone else around and picking up what the little things that they're doing that would have taken me a decade probably to learn on my own, and it would have taken a lot of mistakes and a lot of problems. And it's the kind of thing that, people can get burned out on if they have too many negative experiences. So to avoid some of that, well, how do I say it?
Wasted time or energy.
Time and energy and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually really good advice for any adventure sport. We can get in over our heads on things and try to reinvent the wheel when we really don't have to. You get a mentor, get somebody in there that is a good guide or good trainer and knows what they're doing. They could really make the experience a heck of a lot better for you down the road. Exactly.
And it's an expensive sport to get into. There's, we don't really have any sponsors, so we work full time, but some mushers are able to pull that off. So it's a lot of out of pocket, and to go up and run a big race like Iditarod takes a substantial amount of money. So it's something we're not set up to do every year by any means.
Yeah, you don't take getting into it lightly, I'm sure.
Exactly.
So what's next on your plate?
Well, this year I'll be going back to Russia. My wife's going to be doing most of the racing this year. My wife Jennifer, and she'll be doing some races here in Minnesota and Michigan. She'll probably go up and do some races in Canada. We've been doing this. It's a race called the Hudson Bay Quest. It's a 250 miler up in Churchill, Manitoba. And I'll be over in Siberia for a few weeks and just keep on training for next year, I guess.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, we won't be doing any major races this year.
Okay. So let's tell people where they can find you guys. They can find you, Blake and Jennifer, at racingsiberians.com, right?
That's correct. And I can also be found on Facebook, myself, and we also have a kennel page, which is Manitou Crossing Kennels.
Okay, awesome. We'll get those linked up in the show notes for people to come visit you and follow along, and hope to see you in your next race.
Good. Thank you very much.
All right. So last question I have is, in all this experience, you and Jennifer have been doing this for a long time. There must be a good, funny story involved.
Oh, boy. So one of the best experiences for me was really running with Jennifer in the Iditarod. Like I said, we started about 14 minutes apart and finished just a few seconds apart. And we spent the whole race together, and it was really a great experience, filled with all kinds of highs and lows. And boy, you talk about testing a marriage, that's a good way to start.
Yeah, absolutely. How long have you guys been married?
Oh, let's see, since 2005.
Wow, right on. Well, that's a fun thing to share for you, too.
No doubt. Yeah, it was a great experience.
Good deal. All right, Blake, well, I really appreciate you coming on and telling us about dog sled racing and even skijoring. It's something I'll have to give a shot to and see how that goes.
All right.
All right. Blake, take care. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks.
Hey, thank you so much for listening today. Hope you enjoyed the show. Please do tell your friends about us. We want to make sure that we can help share the word, encouraging others and inspiring people to have great adventures and to make a difference in their world. Thank you.